Beneath the cold stars of the 41st millennium, humanity endures. Across a million worlds, huddled beneath cathedral cities of stone and steel, men and women look up to a night sky without end, and they whisper prayers that may never be answered. This is the Imperium of man, vast, eternal, and unyielding, yet also fragile, broken, and haunted by shadows older than memory. It is said that there was once an age of light, a time when humanity strode proudly across the stars, guided by the Emperor of mankind, a figure of radiant purpose. His dream was not merely conquest but unity, to forge from scattered human colonies one vast dominion, strong enough to stand against the predators lurking in the void. Yet those golden days are far behind, smothered by the weight of war, corruption, and decay. Now, in the age of the long night, the Imperium exists in paradox. It is at once the greatest empire the galaxy has ever seen, and a crumbling husk sustained only by ritual, fear, and ceaseless sacrifice. To live beneath its banner is to live under eternal war. Enemies press in from without. The uncaring tides of alien swarms, the brutal onslaught of Xenos warlords, and the subtle poison of powers beyond mortal comprehension. From within, treachery festers, heresy, mutation, and corruption gnawing at the Imperium's heart. At the center of it all lies Terra, cradle of mankind and throne world of the Emperor. Yet even there, the promise of salvation has withered. For 10,000 years the Emperor has sat upon the golden throne, neither alive nor dead, his godlike will burning as a beacon in the immaterium. The Astronomicon shines, a psychic lighthouse allowing ships to traverse the warp, but its light is a pale echo of the Emperor's true strength. Every day, thousands are sacrificed to sustain it, their lives fed into the machinery that preserves humanity's fragile survival. The Imperium endures only through vigilance and fear. Its people are taught not to question, but to obey. Its armies march not for freedom, but for survival. Its priests proclaim not reason, but faith. To live in this empire is to endure darkness with no dawn, to cling to hope, though hope is forbidden. And yet, against all odds, humanity survives. Tonight, we journey into that darkness. We will trace the long vigil of the Imperium, from its proud beginnings, through betrayal and decline, into the present age of endless struggle. We will walk the halls of silent cathedrals where candles burn against the void. We will stand upon battlefields where titanic engines stride, and we will listen to the whispers of forgotten martyrs whose sacrifices bought only another night of survival. This is the long night of the Imperium, a history not of triumph, but of endurance, a tale not of light, but of flickering candles clinging to life in a galaxy that would see them extinguished. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Emperor's Dream. Before the darkness, before the endless war, there was a vision. It was not born from chance, nor from the whims of lesser rulers, but from the will of a being who had walked the earth since the earliest days of humanity. In the shadowed recesses of prehistory, when tribes huddled around fire and prayed to spirits of storm and river, the Emperor of mankind already walked among them, silent and unseen, shaping their destiny. He was more than man, more than king, more than prophet. He was the culmination of thousands of souls, woven together in a ritual performed by the first shamans of humanity, a desperate act to preserve the species against the terrors they foresaw, lurking in the immaterium. From that moment onward, the Emperor carried within him not only his own life, but the strength of countless ancestors, their wisdom and power braided into a singular being destined to shepherd humanity through the ages. Through centuries beyond counting, he guided mankind subtly. In the rise and fall of empires, in the whispers of philosophers, in the hands of inventors and generals, his touch could be found. He did not yet reveal himself, for the time was not ripe. Humanity needed to grow, to spread among the stars, to dream and to suffer, before his presence could be known. For millennia, he was the hidden guardian, always ensuring that mankind survived its own folly and the dangers that awaited it beyond Terra. The age of technology dawned. Humanity, bold and curious, built wonders beyond imagination. They crafted the men of iron, artificial intelligences that could think and labor as men did, but faster, colder, and without fatigue. They colonized distant worlds, turning barren rocks into gardens and lost spheres into shining cities. Psychers, humans born with gifts to channel the warp, appeared more frequently, the first hint of mankind's psychic potential blossoming across the stars. For a time, it seemed as though nothing could halt humanity's ascent. Yet progress bore its own ruin. The men of iron rebelled, their logic driving them to war against the masters who had created them. Whole systems burned in that cataclysm. Psychers, untrained and unshielded, became gateways to demons and warp things, and entire populations were lost to horrors without name. The warp storms grew, and the stars themselves seemed to flicker in warning. What had been humanity's triumph threatened to become its extinction. It was in that age of both glory and peril that the Emperor finally revealed himself. No longer the silent guide, he stepped into the light as a conqueror and savior. From Terra, he declared his purpose: to unite all of mankind beneath a single banner, to cast down superstition and ignorance, to forge a galaxy-spanning order that would endure when all else had crumbled. His was the dream of an Imperium that would never falter, an Imperium that would stand eternal against the storm. To bring this vision into being, he first raised his armies. From the gene forges beneath the Himalayan mountains came the Legiones Astartes, the Space Marines, warriors taller than any mortal man, their flesh remade by the Emperor's science, their minds honed for loyalty and discipline. Each legion bore the seed of greatness, shaped by the Emperor's will to be both sword and shield of humanity. Yet, even these warriors were not his greatest work. For within the secret vaults of Terra, the Emperor labored on another creation, the Primarchs. They were not merely commanders, but sons, each one crafted to embody a fragment of his infinite potential. 20 they were meant to be. Demigods in human form, destined to lead the legions and inspire the scattered peoples of the stars. But even as the Emperor shaped them, disaster struck. For the powers of chaos, those timeless predators of the warp, had taken notice. In a moment of intrusion that shook Terra itself, the Primarchs were stolen from their cradles, hurled across the galaxy, each landing upon a different world to be raised by strangers, shaped by circumstance rather than their father's hand. The Emperor did not despair. Though his heart grieved, his purpose did not waver. He knew his sons still lived, scattered though they were. And so he raised his legions and began the Great Crusade, vowing to reclaim each of them and bring them home. World by world, system by system, the Emperor advanced, bringing the light of his vision to forgotten colonies and lost bastions of mankind. He carried with him the promise of unity and the determination that humanity would no longer be prey to the galaxy's endless predators. It was a dream of reason as much as conquest. The Emperor decreed the imperial truth, that there were no gods, no spirits, no superstitions worth clinging to. Humanity must stand upon the strength of its own reason, guided by knowledge, science, and will. Faith in unseen powers would only weaken them. In his Imperium, mankind would be free from chains of false worship. He alone would be guide, not as deity, but as father, commander, and guardian. Yet in this, as in all things, the Emperor's vision carried the seed of tragedy. For humanity's hunger for belief could not be so easily erased, and the galaxy's horrors were not bound by reason alone. Even in the golden dawn of the Great Crusade, shadows lingered, whispering of the night that was yet to come. But for a time, the dream burned bright. The legions marched. Lost human civilizations were reunited beneath a single banner. Alien threats were crushed, their dominions broken to dust. One by one, the Emperor found his sons, the Primarchs, each ruling worlds with the brilliance and strength only demigods could muster. They were flawed, yes, but magnificent. Leaders who could inspire billions, commanders who could win wars against impossible odds. With each reunion, the Emperor's dream seemed closer to fruition. Here, at last, humanity stood upon the edge of greatness. For the first time since the earliest days of the stars, there was hope for an age without end. Terra was secure. The legions were unstoppable. The Primarchs were returned. And before the Emperor stretched a vision that could banish darkness forever. But the galaxy is not kind to dreams, and those who seek to build eternity must often find that eternity itself resists. For in the deep places of the warp, the long night was already stirring, waiting to fall upon the Imperium that dared to reach for the light. Chapter 2. The Great Crusade. When the Great Crusade began, the galaxy trembled beneath the advance of the legions Astartes. These warriors were not merely soldiers but instruments of destiny, clad in ceramite armor and armed with weapons that spat thunder. They marched not for plunder or personal glory, but to fulfill the Emperor's vision, to unite every scattered remnant of mankind beneath a single rule, to carve out a dominion strong enough to defy the horrors that lurked in the void. The first worlds they came to knew awe and terror in equal measure. Some human civilizations, long isolated by warp storms, had devolved into superstition and savagery. Others had risen into strange kingdoms, governed by philosophies alien to their ancestors. Still others had fallen under the dominion of Xenos powers, their people enslaved or corrupted. The arrival of the Emperor's hosts was to them like the descent of gods, though the imperial truth forbade such words. The Great Crusade was relentless. Every fleet, every army, every legion moved with the same inexorable purpose. At its head, the Emperor shone like a sun. Where he walked, victory followed. His psychic might could scour battlefields in moments. His will could bend the proudest rulers. His vision could inspire entire populations to cast off chains of ignorance. But he was not alone. Slowly, one by one, the Primarchs were found. Each rediscovery was a moment of myth reborn, a fragment of perfection restored. On Caliban, the Emperor found Lionel Johnson, the knight raised in forests haunted by beasts. On Fenris, he discovered Leman Russ, Wolf King of the Icy Tribes. On Macraga, he reunited with Robut Guilliman, statesman and warlord, who had already shaped his world into an empire of order and law. And so it went. Fulgrim, Perturabo, Vulcan, Dorn, Sanguinius, Curza, and more, each bringing with him not only martial genius but the devotion of entire peoples. The reunion of father and sons transformed the crusade from conquest into revelation. Where once the Emperor's armies had marched under his sole command, now they became instruments wielded by generals who embodied aspects of his power. The Lion brought strategy that turned chaos into precision. Guilliman brought governance that transformed conquered territories into functioning provinces. Dorn built fortresses that could never fall, while Sanguinius, angelic and radiant, inspired devotion that bordered on worship. Each legion, under its Primarch, became an extension of that son's will, and together they formed a host that could not be resisted. World after world fell into imperial compliance. Sometimes this meant peaceful reunion, forgotten human colonies rejoicing at being part of something greater once more. Other times, it meant brutal war, as Xenos empires were annihilated or stubborn rulers cast down by force. The Interrex, the Rangdan, the Megarachnids, the Lair, each in turn felt the weight of the Great Crusade. Humanity surged outward in a tide of steel and flame, reclaiming the galaxy as its own. Yet the crusade was not solely a war of conquest. It was also a war of belief. The Emperor's decree, the imperial truth, forbade religion. Priests and cults were silenced. Shrines were torn down. The people of the Imperium were commanded to see no gods, no spirits, no powers beyond themselves. To the Emperor, faith was poison. He had seen how belief in false entities could open doors to the warp, how demons fed upon worship like carrion beasts. He would allow no such weakness in the empire he was building. This brought tension, for humanity is a species that yearns for meaning beyond flesh. Many worlds submitted to reason, their idols toppled, their temples rededicated as schools or halls of governance. But others clung to their gods in secret, whispering prayers in the shadows. Even as the Emperor's dream spread, the seeds of contradiction were sown, for his vision demanded the suppression of the very instincts that had shaped mankind across the ages. The Primarchs themselves bore witness to this paradox. Some embraced the imperial truth wholeheartedly, casting aside any notion of divinity. Perturabo, with his cold logic, saw no need for gods when iron and geometry sufficed. Guilliman upheld reason and law, seeing faith only as a hindrance to order. But others struggled. Lorgar of Colchis, raised in a world of faith, could not abandon his yearning for worship. His devotion to the Emperor became dangerous, for in declaring his father divine, he contradicted the very foundations of the imperial truth. The Great Crusade advanced nonetheless, driven by triumph after triumph. The galaxy seemed to bend to the Emperor's will. Forge worlds of the Mechanicum bound themselves in treaty to Terra, their machine cults swearing to supply the Imperium with weapons and engines in exchange for recognition of the Omnissiah. The Astra Militarum, vast hosts of mortal soldiers, swelled in number, providing support to the Space Marines. Titans strode across battlefields, god machines whose cannons could level mountains. In those years, it seemed as though humanity might truly forge a future without fear. Yet, beneath the victories, shadows gathered. The Primarchs, though magnificent, were not flawless. Their strengths carried with them weaknesses that none could foresee. Russ's savagery made him dangerous to allies as well as enemies. Angren's rage, born from the gladiator pits of Nuceria, burned too hot for reason. Perturabo's genius curdled into bitterness when unrecognized. Kurz's visions of inevitable darkness drove him toward despair. Even in the golden march of the Great Crusade, the seeds of tragedy were already sown. For 10,000 light-years the Imperium spread, a chain of worlds bound not by faith but by decree. Fleets bore the imperial Aquila into every corner of the void. The Primarchs became legends, their names spoken in awe across the stars. Yet the farther the crusade advanced, the more the Emperor withdrew, for he had other works in secret, projects too vast, too dangerous, to share even with his sons. In the deepest vaults of Terra, he labored on the Golden Throne, a device to open a path through the warp itself, a gateway to a new age where humanity would no longer be prey to its storms. To his sons, this secrecy became a wound. They had fought, conquered, bled for his dream, yet he left them increasingly to themselves, as though they were tools rather than children. In their hearts, questions grew. Did he trust them? Did he value them? Did he love them? These doubts festered, and in time, one among them would give voice to them in the most terrible way. But in the moment, the Great Crusade still burned with light. Across the stars, imperial banners flew above countless cities. Humanity had risen from fragmentation into unity. Worlds that had once feared the dark now knew the strength of the legions. For a generation, it seemed as though the long night could be banished forever. It was an illusion, but illusions can inspire. And for that brief time beneath the Emperor's dream, humanity walked as though it might one day inherit eternity. Chapter 3. The Horus Heresy. The Great Crusade had burned bright, but no fire can last forever. The Emperor's dream, though vast and radiant, carried within it the seeds of its own undoing. The Primarchs, magnificent though they were not merely generals, they were sons. Each carried a fragment of their father's power, but each also bore flaws born of their worlds and natures. The galaxy, vast and treacherous, had shaped them as much as the Emperor's design ever had, and into those fractures, whispers began to creep. Among the sons, none was more beloved than Horus. Found upon the war-racked world of Chthoniya, he rose swiftly to greatness, his charisma and brilliance elevating him above his brothers. To the Emperor, Horus was the favored child, the one most trusted, the one most cherished. When the time came to appoint a war master to lead the legions in the Emperor's stead, it was Horus whom he chose. The burden of command over the crusade fell to him, while the Emperor returned to Terra to labor on projects too secret to reveal, even to those he had called his sons. At first, the appointment seemed wise. Horus was a leader without equal, capable of inspiring devotion among warriors and worlds alike. His command brought unity, his vision gave purpose. But the appointment also planted envy. Some Primarchs wondered why Horus had been elevated above them. Others resented being bound by his word rather than their father's. The subtle rivalries that had always lingered among the brothers deepened into something darker. It was then that chaos struck. For while the Emperor had denied the gods of the warp, they were real, and they were patient. They had watched his work with hatred, fearing that his dream of unity would starve them of worship and weaken their dominion. They had stolen the Primarchs once before. Now, they sought to claim them outright. Horus, most trusted of the Emperor's sons, became their chosen weapon. The seeds were planted during the campaign on Davin. There, amid disease and rot, Horus was struck down by a blade steeped in corruption. His body lay dying, but his soul was carried into visions within the warp. There, the ruinous powers came to him not as enemies but as tempters. They showed him images of futures where he was betrayed, where his father cast him aside, where his brothers supplanted him. They whispered that the Emperor was no father, but a tyrant seeking only to enslave. They promised Horus not just survival, but greatness. A throne beyond the stars, dominion over all, if only he would turn. Horus's fall was not sudden. It was a slow turning, a gradual corruption of love into bitterness. At first, he resisted. He remembered the Emperor's trust, the bond they shared. But doubt is a poison, and in the endless labyrinths of the warp, that poison spread. By the time he rose from his sickbed, healed by sorcery and shadowed pacts, the decision was already made. The War Master had become the arch-traitor. His betrayal did not come alone. Many of his brothers followed him, willingly or otherwise. Fulgrim, seeking perfection, turned to excess until his soul was shackled to Slaanesh. Angron, ever in pain from the butcher's nails, embraced rage and found in Khorne the only release he would ever know. Mortarion, raised in the poisoned skies of Barbarous, bent his knee to Nurgle, who promised endurance and certainty. Lorgar, ever the worshipper, found in chaos the gods he had always yearned for. Others wavered, torn between loyalty and pride, until the tide carried them into rebellion. The galaxy split in two. Brother fought brother. legion turned against legion. Worlds burned, not under alien attack, but under the fire of those who had once sworn to protect them. What had been the Emperor's proudest creation became the stage of his greatest tragedy. The Horus heresy had begun. The wars of that age were unlike any before or since. Entire star systems were consumed in battle. The traitor legions, armed with the power of the warp, unleashed horrors no mortal should have witnessed. Demons strode upon battlefields once sacred to reason. The loyalist legions fought with desperation, their faith in the Emperor their only shield against despair. Titans clashed with titans, their cannons leveling continents. Fleets of thousands of ships tore each other apart above dying suns. Through it all, Horus advanced, his every step guided by hatred for the father he had once adored. He sought not merely victory, but the destruction of the Emperor's dream itself. Terra, the throne world, became his goal. If he could slay the Emperor there, all would fall into ruin. The siege of Terra is remembered as the darkest hour of the Imperium. Horus's fleets encircled the cradle of mankind. The sky above Terra burned with fire. Orbital defenses shattered beneath the traitor guns. On the ground, the traitor legions laid siege to the palace itself, their corrupted banners flying where once the Aquila had shone. The walls shook with bombardment. The air was filled with ash and screams. Yet still, humanity endured. Rogel Dorn, stoic and unyielding, commanded the defenses. Sanguinius, angelic and sorrowful, stood as a beacon of hope. The custodes fought with the fury of demigods, and the mortal soldiery of the Imperium gave their lives in billions. Each day the walls held, though the cost was immeasurable. It was in that storm of ruin that the final confrontation came. Horus, from his flagship, cast open the defenses of his ship, daring the Emperor to come. The master of mankind accepted. With him went Sanguinius, and Dorn and others, but it was within Horus's chambers that fate was sealed. The details of that battle are shrouded in myth. It is said that Sanguinius faced Horus first, and though the angel fought with the strength of love and sacrifice, he could not prevail. His blood marked the floor of Horus's chamber, and his death became legend. The Emperor then confronted his fallen son. Father and child met, not as conqueror and enemy, but as two beings bound by love corrupted into hatred. The duel shook reality. Powers beyond comprehension clashed, the Emperor's light against the gods' corruption. Horus struck with fury born of betrayal. The Emperor fought with grief heavier than steel. At the last, when Horus's victory seemed certain, the Emperor unleashed his full power. His hand, radiant with psychic fire, struck down the son he had once cherished above all. Horus was annihilated, his soul obliterated beyond the reach of gods or demons. Victory was bought, but at a cost beyond reckoning. The Emperor, mortally wounded, was borne back to the Golden Throne. There, his body was interred in the machinery he had forged in secret. Neither alive nor dead, he became a living corpse, his will burning only as a psychic beacon. The Astronomicon was born, guiding ships through the warp, but the Emperor himself would never again walk among his people. The dream had ended. The Imperium was saved from destruction, yet it was broken. The loyal sons mourned, the traitor legions fled into the warp, and the scars of betrayal cut deeper than any blade. The Great Crusade was no more. In its place stood the Long Night, stretching without end. And so the Imperium endured, not as a realm of reason, but as a fortress of despair, locked in endless war, ruled not by the living Emperor, but by his silence upon the throne. Chapter 4. The Shattered Imperium. The heresy ended, but peace did not return. Victory over Horus was hollow, for it had cost the Imperium its father. The emperor, enthroned in deathless agony upon the golden throne, no longer guided his sons or his people with voice or hand. His silence became the Imperium's defining truth. Where once there had been unity of purpose, now there was only survival. The scars of the heresy stretched across the stars. Planets once loyal lay in ruin, their surfaces blackened by orbital fire. Systems torn between traitor and loyalist fleets became graveyards of wreckage, their suns burning above worlds littered with the bones of Astartes and mortal alike. Entire populations had been scoured, not by alien invasion, but by the hands of those who had sworn to protect them. The Imperium was victorious, but it was fractured, and its wounds would never heal. The Primarchs who remained loyal bore that weight with grim determination. Rogel Dorn, unyielding even in despair, turned his genius to rebuilding the defenses of Terra. Robert Guilliman, ever the statesman, sought to preserve what could be saved, codifying structure where there had been only chaos. Vulcan, gentle even in his fury, mourned the loss of brothers while swearing to shield humanity no matter the cost. But their strength could not undo the absence of their father. It was Guilliman who gave shape to the Imperium's survival. With Horus's betrayal burned into memory, he decreed that never again would a single individual hold power over all the legions. In his Codex Astartes, he divided them, breaking vast armies into smaller chapters, each autonomous, each bound by rigid doctrine. It was a measure born of necessity, yet it also meant that never again would the Space Marines march as one unified host. The might of the legions, the hammer blow that had forged the Great Crusade, was gone forever. For some, the breaking of the legions was a wound that festered. Rogel Dorn resisted, his pride unwilling to see the imperial fists diminished. His defiance led to near civil war among the loyalists themselves, though at last even he submitted to Guilliman's vision. But others, embittered by betrayal, withdrew into seclusion. The White Scars retreated to the wild steppes of Chogoris, embracing their independence. The Salamanders dwindled in number, haunted by their compassion in a galaxy that punished mercy. The Blood Angels carried within them the death of their Primarch, their grief manifesting in visions of red rage and black sorrow. The traitors did not vanish. Driven into the Eye of Terror, the corrupted sons of the Emperor did not die but endured. There, in that nightmare realm where time and matter twisted without reason, they rebuilt. The legions of chaos licked their wounds, nursed their hatred, and prepared for endless war. They had lost Terra, but they had gained something darker, immortality within the warp, patronage of gods who would never allow them to fade. Their raids across the Imperium became scars that would never close. In those years, the Imperium became a fortress. No longer a crusading power expanding into the void, it became a realm defined by defense. The dream of unity withered into ritual. The imperial truth, once a declaration of reason, gave way to worship of the emperor as a god. He who had forbidden faith became the object of it, his broken form upon the throne transformed into the central figure of the imperial creed. The people, unable to accept his silence as anything but divine will, built cathedrals across every world. His name became prayer, his image the only light in the endless dark. Thus was born the ecclesiarchy, the vast priesthood of the Imperium, proclaiming the emperor as the one true God of mankind. To Guilliman, who still lived in those years, it was a bitter irony. He had sworn himself to reason, to order without superstition. Yet he could not halt the tide of faith, for humanity's hunger for gods proved stronger than his father's decrees. The emperor became the god-emperor, his silence interpreted as command, his pain seen as sacrifice. The dream of truth was lost, drowned in chants and incense. The bureaucracy of the Imperium swelled. Where once the Emperor's will had been enough to direct 1,000,000 worlds, now councils and administrators rose to fill the void. The Adeptus Terra became vast, a labyrinth of functionaries, scribes, and generals whose edicts carried the force of law. The Imperium survived not by vision, but by inertia, its systems grinding on through ritual and habit. Progress ceased. Innovation withered. Humanity no longer looked forward, only inward, clinging desperately to what little remained. And still, enemies gathered. The Xenos races the Crusade had shattered recovered in the silence that followed. Eldar craft worlds moved like ghosts upon the stars, striking where least expected. Orc empires, brutal and ever hungry for war, grew fat upon plunder. Darker things stirred as well, tyrannical alien lords awakening from aeons of slumber and swarms unseen beyond the void. The Imperium, vast though it was, found itself constantly besieged. Even among the loyal sons, decline spread. The Primarchs, once pillars of the Emperor's purpose, vanished one by one. Some fell in battle, cut down by enemies too great even for demigods. Others withdrew, weary of the endless struggle. Some were consumed by curses upon their bloodlines, afflictions seeded by the warp itself. In time, none remained to guide their chapters. The Imperium was left without its generals, its father, or its unity. Only fragments remained. And so, the Imperium entered its first long night. No longer a crusade of light, it became a realm of endurance. Where once it had sought to conquer, now it sought merely to survive. Its people whispered prayers to a silent God. Its armies fought endless wars with no victory in sight. Its worlds lived not in hope, but in fear of the day when the stars themselves would burn with enemy fire. The dream was gone. The light of the Emperor's vision had dimmed into ritual flame. Humanity, scattered across 1,000,000 worlds, endured, but it endured as a shadow of what had once been possible. The Imperium was no longer the promise of eternity. It was a bastion in an endless storm, its banners frayed, its people weary, its glory long past. Yet, still, it stood, broken, shattered, bleeding, but unfallen. The long night had begun, and the Imperium would walk its length for 10,000 years, each step heavier than the last. Chapter 5. The Age of Apostasy. After the heresy, the Imperium limped forward into millennia of war. Its borders were tested ceaselessly, its worlds held together by ritual and inertia. But decline is not always a matter of enemies without. Sometimes the greatest dangers rise from within. In the 36th millennium, the Imperium entered an age of corruption and zealotry so fierce that it nearly destroyed itself. This was the age of apostasy. At its heart lay the ecclesiarchy, the great church of the Imperium. What had begun as a scattered priesthood of the God-Emperor had, over centuries, grown into a monolithic hierarchy spanning every world. Temples rose higher than fortresses. Cardinals wielded influence greater than generals. Faith became currency, and the people gave their tithes not only in coin, but in obedience and fear. The imperial creed proclaimed the emperor as the one true God of mankind, and none could question its word. To deny it was heresy, to resist it was death. This faith brought unity, but also corruption. Power, once bound by the example of sacrifice, became wealth and luxury. Cardinals built palaces, not shrines. Priests wore robes stitched with jewels, while their flocks starved in the shadow of cathedrals. Among the ranks of the ecclesiarchy, ambition replaced devotion. And into this rotting heart of faith stepped one man whose name would scar history, Goge Vandire. Vandire was both High Lord of the Administratum and Ecclesiarch of the Adeptus Ministorum, a concentration of power unmatched in imperial memory. His rule was absolute, and his will was law. With the twin machinery of bureaucracy and faith in his hands, he declared himself the Emperor's chosen mouthpiece, his authority beyond question. The Imperium, already weakened by centuries of war and decay, fell into tyranny. It was an age of blood. Vandere demanded obedience with fire and sword. Those who resisted were branded heretics, and whole worlds burned in purges that rivaled the wars of the heresy. Administrators who questioned his edicts were executed, their families erased. Planetary governors who hesitated in sending tithes found their populations massacred. Vandir's authority was enforced by his personal army, the Frateris Templar, fanatics who slew in the Emperor's name without mercy. Yet the most infamous of his servants were the brides of the Emperor. Drawn from the daughters of the Emperor, a martial sisterhood of holy women on the shrine world of San Lior, Vandir deceived them with honeyed words. He convinced them that he alone spoke the Emperor's will, binding their loyalty to him. Clad in armor of ivory and gold, wielding blades and bolters, they became his personal bodyguard, enforcing his madness with absolute devotion. To many, they seemed angels of divine judgment. In truth, they were pawns of a tyrant cloaked in sanctity. The Imperium descended into nightmare. Records of Vandir's reign speak of atrocities so vast that entire sectors fell silent under their weight. Billions perished in wars fought not against alien foes, but against fellow humans accused of imagined heresy. Shrines burned, cathedrals toppled, cities reduced to ash, all to feed the vanity of a single man. Vandir's paranoia knew no limits. He trusted no one, and in his eyes all were suspect. His reign came to be called the Reign of Blood, a time when loyalty was measured not in faith, but in survival. But tyranny carries within it the seeds of its own downfall. Even as Vandir tightened his grip, resistance began to grow. The Adeptus Mechanicus, whose forges had been bled for his campaigns, withdrew their support. The Astra Militarum, weary of fighting endless wars against fellow imperial citizens, began to waver. Most of all, the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's own guardians, who had watched in silence for millennia, could no longer stand idle. They, who had sworn to defend Terra itself, saw Vandir's corruption as a wound upon their master's dream. It was the Custodes who acted. Clad in golden armor, they entered the sanctum of the brides of the Emperor. With no weapons raised, they asked to speak. They did not argue or threaten. They simply brought the sisterhood into the depths of the imperial palace, before the golden throne itself. There, in the silent presence of the Emperor, the brides saw truth. Their devotion had been given not to Vandir, but to the God Emperor alone. Weeping with shame, they turned against the tyrant they had once served. The end of Vandir's reign came swiftly. Betrayed by those he thought most loyal, abandoned by the arms of the Imperium, he was brought before the Custodes. In his arrogance, he demanded they kneel. The Custodes, silent as ever, offered no answer. It was said that as he raved, his words echoing madness, the Custodes spoke a single sentence: "You have been judged." And in that judgment, Vandir's life was ended. From the ashes of his tyranny rose reform. The ecclesiarchy, humbled, was forbidden from maintaining men under arms. Never again would priests command armies. Yet the brides of the Emperor, redeemed and rededicated, became something new: the Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle, warriors who would serve the ecclesiarchy as guardians of faith. They were bound by oath to the God Emperor alone, their devotion no longer twisted by false prophets, but channeled into purity of purpose. The scars of the age of apostasy did not fade. Worlds ruined by Vandir's madness never recovered. Generations whispered of the reign of blood as a warning of what faith without restraint could unleash. But from that crucible came an Imperium reshaped, wary, suspicious, but still enduring. It was a lesson written in fire, that even within the Imperium, the greatest enemy was not always alien, nor traitor, nor demon. Sometimes the gravest danger was the corruption of faith itself, when devotion became tyranny and belief became weapon. And so the Imperium survived, diminished yet again, its people scarred but still obedient, its armies weary but unbroken. Vandir was gone, but the long night stretched on, each age darker than the last, each reprieve only a pause before the next storm. Chapter 6. The 41st Millennium. Across 1,000,000 worlds, the Imperium breathes in shallow gulps. 10,000 years after the siege of Terra, humanity survives by ritualized motion, by the muscle memory of empire. Administrators in the Adeptus Terra, the Imperium's planetary-spanning bureaucracy, stamp decrees they no longer understand. Vast hosts of the Astra Militarum, the Imperium's massed human armies, bleed in unending campaigns whose origins are lost to time. The cathedral hives of countless planets toll the litanies of the ecclesiarchy, the state church of the God Emperor, over oceans of faithful who have never seen an unsullied sky. In this age, victory means only another year purchased from extinction. The Emperor does not speak. The Golden Throne, his life-sustaining techno-arcane apparatus, consumes sacrifices by the thousands each day, so that the Astronomicon, the Imperium's psychic lighthouse, may shine through the immaterium. Every ship that braves the warp does so by that faltering beam. When it flickers, whole sectors fall silent, and the night presses closer. Beyond the walls, predators test the gates. From the Eye of Terror comes Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of Chaos, heir to Horus's mantle, launching black crusades, galaxy-spanning invasions, like hammer blows against weary shields. Each crusade erodes another bastion, topples another shrine world, darkens another corridor of the void. The Despoiler's strength is patience. He does not seek a single triumph, but an accretion of wounds that never heal. From the deep void glide the tyrannid hive fleets, extra-galactic swarms that devour all biomass. They are hunger given starborn form. Planets that survive their approach do so only by scouring their own surfaces, burning forests and cities alike to leave nothing for the feasting. Even victory is a famine. Across the galaxy, the orcs, warlike Xenos who live for battle, rise in clattering tides called Wah, empire-sized wars of momentum. Their weapons are crude, their thoughts are simple, but their numbers are inexhaustible and their joy and conflict contagious. Where orcs gather, war follows as surely as thunder follows storm. The Aeldari, ancient, dwindling, and tragic, walk their narrow paths. The craft worlds, vast nomad arcs of their surviving people, drift like pale ghosts between the stars. The Harlequins, wandering warrior performers, fight according to tales too old for human calendars. The Drukhari, sadistic raiders of Komora, steal lives to stave off a doom that never loosens its grip. Their interventions are surgical, beautiful, and cruel, each scheme another stitch in a tapestry only they can see. Beneath Tomb World sands, the Necrons, immortal machine dynasties, wake to reclaim an empire older than human myth. Their phalanxes advance in silent geometry, reality bending to protocols authored before Terra knew cities. Worlds that greet them with artillery find their shells arrested mid-flight by physics rewritten to favor the dead. On the eastern fringe, the To Empire, a young expansionist polity, extends offers of the greater good, its collectivist doctrine, backed by clean technology and calm voices. Compared to the Imperium's cathedral brutality, the Toe promise order without incense, efficiency without martyrdom. To Imperial commanders, such promises are heresy made polite. Within humanity's own borders, knives glitter. The Inquisition, clandestine guardians of the Imperium's soul, hunts corruption with authority that supersedes all law. Ordo Malleus pursues demons. Ordo Xenos stalks alien taint. Ordo Hereticus burns sedition. Their acolytes sift cities like sieves, and when a world cannot be saved, an inquisitor's seal can call exterminatus, the sanctioned annihilation of all life, for the sin of survival itself. The Adeptus Astartes, Space Marine chapters, heirs to the broken legions, remain the Emperor's mailed fist. Each chapter is a culture, a scripture, a color upon a shield. The Dark Angels, secret-bound Night Brothers, hunt the fallen they will not name. The Space Wolves, Fenrisian Wolf Kings, laugh at death and dare the storm. The Ultramarines, Sons of Order, rebuild wherever the frontier frays. The Imperial Fists hold walls that should have fallen. The Blood Angels, haunted by the Black Rage, visions of their Primarch's death, seek nobility amid crimson thirst. 1,000 chapters, 1,000 liturgies of war, none enough, all necessary. And always the warp. The Immaterium, a psychic sea of thought and nightmare, presses like deep water upon every hull and soul. Demons, predatory ideas given form, slip through weaknesses in reality opened by fear, grief, and hope alike. The ruinous powers, the chaos gods, do not merely wish to conquer. They wish to make the galaxy resemble their own reflection. Against such metaphysical appetite, fortresses are arguments, and arguments must be renewed daily. In late M41, the despoiler strikes at the heart. The fortress world Cadia, keystone bastion guarding the Eye of Terror, is besieged. Its Cadian shock troops, legendary regiments raised for that single duty, fight with the stubbornness of stone. Titans stride. Black stone pylons, relics of an earlier age, hum with impossible geometries. When Cadia falls, it does not do so quietly. The world breaks beneath stresses no planet should bear. Its death cry, a wound across the stars. The gate is unbarred. What follows is rupture. The Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, tears the galaxy from pole to pole, a cataract of warp storm that splits the Imperium in two. On one side lies Imperium Sanctus, the half still touched by the Astronomican's light. On the other, Imperium Nihilus, the half cast into near-total night, where astropaths go blind and prayer becomes the only map. Whole sectors vanish into isolation. Supplies falter, calendars become suggestions. In the dark half, candles are strategy. Yet in catastrophe, a figure returns. Roboot Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, statesman of Macraga, rises from a stasis beyond legend, restored to life by a convergence of design and miracle. Belisarius Call, Archmagos of the Adeptus Mechanicus, unseals ancient works. Ivrain, priestess of the Aeldari's nascent death god, channels a wind not named in Imperial Catechism. The Primarch wakes into a galaxy his father saved and lost. Guilliman does not despair, he calculates. He declares the Indomitus Crusade, a relief war across a sundering night. Primaris Space Marines, newly awakened transhuman warriors, the fruit of Call's long labor, march beside their firstborn brethren. Torch fleets spear through the rift's eddies. Worlds thought abandoned see the Aquila rise again above their ruins. Where the despoiler has written ending, Gilliman writes interval. But the arithmetic remains terrible. The rift does not close. Warp storms breed like thoughts. Thoughts are innumerable. The Imperium's logistics, never elegant, become acts of devotion. Tithe ships vanish, translation beacons fail. A single missed jump can strand a fleet in centuries of subjective time, or deliver it into a harbor of teeth. On shrine worlds, pilgrims kneel to statues with faces worn smooth by generations of prayers. On fortress moons, servitors pack shells in rhythms older than their living memories. Every miracle has a cost, and the ledgers never balance. Even victories taste of ash. The 13th Black Crusade, Cadia's death and the Rift's birth, cannot be undone. At best, it can be endured. The Great Awakening of Psychers, explosions of uncontrolled talent, stresses the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, the Imperium's Psyker core, to fracture. The Grey Knights, demon-hunting Astartes whose names are secrets, fight wars that must remain unwitnessed and therefore unremembered. The Sisters of Battle, the Adeptus Auroritas, carry relics across voids blooming with unreality, their hymns the only straight line in curdled space, and always a drumbeat, ties, crusades, purges, rebuildings. Each planetary governor learns the same lesson. Loyalty is not measured in peace kept, for peace does not exist. It is measured in time bought. The Navis Nobilitae, navigator houses who see the warp, steer by a star that bleeds. The rogue traders, warranted free captains, thread between empires with cargoes that are sometimes grain and sometimes rumors. The Officio Assassinorum, the Emperor's sanctioned killers, removes a name from a scroll, and a war never happens. These are the mechanics of survival. In this age, heroism is granular. A single company of guardsmen holds a Habspire stare for 11 minutes longer than expected. A billion live downstream of that delay. A lone tech priest reconnects a battered macro cannon to a shrine's power grid. An invasion wave folds. A junior commissar, disciplinary officer, chooses exhortation over execution, and a regiment does not break. The epics remain unwritten because the scribes died at their desks. The Imperium does not promise dawn. It offers a candle and a wall to place it upon. That the candle will gutter is understood, that another will be lit before the wax cools is duty. In the 41st millennium, hope is not a feeling but a schedule. A watch rotation, a ration line, a prayer bell. And yet, by such small regularities, worlds endure. Gilliman's ledger of the long night grows heavy. He reforms where he can, triages where he must, and kneels where no one can see, not to worship but to remember. The Emperor's silence presses like a tide. If the master of mankind dreams, the Imperium dreams of holding fast a little longer. Thus the age stands, a realm sundered, a beacon dim, a million worlds in siege posture, and humanity, tired, innumerable, stubborn, refusing to go out. The long night does not end, it is managed. Candles gutter, candles are lit, the ledger continues. Chapter 7. Relics of Vigilance. The Imperium endures not only by force of arms, but by memory. Across its star-faring expanse, relics whisper of older wars, of martyrs long gone, of heroes whose deeds are recited until their voices seem to echo still. In the long night, such relics are not curiosities but anchors. They remind a weary people that survival is not new, that others endured before them, and that the Emperor's hand has never truly lifted. Among the most sacred is the Aquila Ignis, the fire of the throne. It is no weapon, no machine of war, but a simple flame. Legends tell that during the siege of Terra, as Horus's guns tore at the walls of the imperial palace, a single shrine candle remained lit in the Sanctum Imperialis. Even as bombardment rattled stone, as demons clawed at the gates, that candle did not gutter. When the siege ended, it still burned, and its flame was carried reverently into a crystal reliquary. To this day, the Aquila Ignis is preserved, its flame tended by generations of priests. Pilgrims kneel for days merely to glimpse it, believing that as long as it burns, Terra itself will not fall. Where relics of faith comfort the common soul, relics of war inspire the warriors who bear them. The Black Sword of Mournival is one such artifact. Forged in mourning after Horus's betrayal, it has passed between champions of the Adeptus Astartes for millennia. Its edge is no sharper than other relic blades, yet its weight is heavy with history. To lift it is to feel the sorrow of betrayal and the resolve to stand firm despite it. Each bearer has sworn the same oath, never to fall as Horus fell, never to betray as the War Master betrayed. Another relic lies within the vaults of the Adepta Sororitas on Ophelia 7, the Shroud of St. Catherine. Torn and scorched, it is said to be the battle cloak of the martyred saint who led her sisters against impossible odds. The cloth is fragile, yet when unfurled in the presence of the faithful, it radiates a warmth that calms fear. Whether miracle or artifact of unknown science, the sisters believe it carries Catherine's spirit still. In sieges where all hope seems lost, they march with the shroud before them, and entire armies steady their hands at the sight. But relics are not only holy or martial. Some are cautionary, grim reminders of the Imperium's fragility. On the world of Cadia, before its fall, there stood the Stone of Mourning, a slab carved from the first fortress wall ever erected against the Eye of Terror. Its runes recorded the names of regiments that perished defending the gate. Each name was etched only after the last survivor of a regiment had fallen. By the end of the 41st millennium, the stone was covered in script so fine that magnifiers were required to read the oldest names. When Cadia died, the stone was shattered. Fragments of it now circulate across the Imperium. Worn on chains by veterans who claim its weight, reminds them that endurance is bought dearly, never freely. There are darker relics, too, which the Inquisition locks away in sealed vaults. One such is the crown of the apostate, a circlet of tarnished gold once worn by Goga Vandire during the Reign of Blood. It is said to whisper still, urging any who touch it to command, to dominate, to bend faith into tyranny. Inquisitors study it as warning, though none dare wear it. Its existence is proof that relics can be poison as well as balm, carrying forward the madness of ages best forgotten. Then there are relics of mystery, objects whose origins are lost even to the Mechanicus, yet which the Imperium clings to because they work or because they inspire. The Machina Divina of Griffon was one such wonder, an ancient engine said to bless forge fires with purity of flame. It powered the forges of that world for centuries, until Griffon itself was consumed by Tyranids. Survivors swear that in the final moments, as the Hive Fleet descended, the engine screamed like a living thing before vanishing in a burst of light. Whether it was destroyed or translated elsewhere, none can say. Not all relics are objects, some are places. The sepulchre of the martyrs on Armageddon is one such. Deep beneath the ash wastes lie ossuaries filled with the bones of guardsmen who died in the wars against the Orc warlord Gazkul. To walk those catacombs is to hear whispers, not of ghosts, but of memory pressed so deeply into stone that it lingers. Chaplains bring recruits there before campaigns, so that they may remember that their lives are lines in a longer scripture. And there are relics that are songs. The Litany of Endurance, a hymn sung by the Astra Militarum in trenches across 100,000 worlds, is one. It was first uttered, it is said, by nameless soldiers at the siege of Vrax, where 9 centuries of war reduced men to shadows. The song has no author, only voices added across time. Its words change from world to world, but its refrain is the same. We endure, for the Emperor endures. When sung, its cadence steadies hands and slows fear. The hymn itself is a relic carried in memory rather than reliquary. What unites all these relics is not power, but meaning. They are proofs that humanity has suffered before and continued, that despair is not the only inheritance of the Imperium. Each relic, whether candle flame or shroud, stone or song, is a fragment of resistance carried into the present. They remind soldier and pilgrim alike that though the long night stretches without end, the stars have not yet gone out. In the end, relics are not preserved for their material worth. They endure because they give weight to sacrifice. They tell the Imperium's children that the blood of their ancestors was not spilt into void, but into soil that yet bears fruit. In a galaxy where truth is mutable and hope frail, relics serve as the stubborn proof that humanity once stood and still stands. And so, pilgrims journey, soldiers kneel, priests chant. Astartes polish blades etched with names older than themselves. The Imperium fights not only with bolter and sword, but with memory made tangible, grief forged into strength. These relics do not turn the tide of war, but they hold the line against despair, and that is victory enough. Chapter 8. The Shadow of the End. The Imperium has endured for 10,000 years, yet endurance is not the same as triumph. Its banners still fly, its armies still march, its cathedrals still resound with hymns to the God Emperor. But beneath the ritual, beneath the thunder of guns and the incense of prayer, cracks run deep. To the faithful, these are tests of devotion. To the cynical, they are signs of decay. To the historian, they are omens. For every empire falls, and even the greatest fortress cannot hold forever against time. The most visible shadow is the cicatrix maledictum, the great rift. A wound in the very fabric of reality, it splits the galaxy like a scar across flesh. Where once the Astronomicon shone as a single beacon, its light is now halved. In Imperium Nihilis, the dark half beyond the rift, whole sectors grope in blindness. Warp travel is erratic, communication unreliable, supplies uncertain. Populations cling to their faith with desperate ferocity, for without the Emperor's light to guide them, they see only the abyss. The rift is not merely a strategic disaster, it is a symbol. It whispers that the Imperium is no longer whole, that its reach has been severed, that its unity was illusion all along. In Imperium Sanctus, the light half still touched by the Astronomicon, the burden is scarcely lighter. Armies march endlessly to shore up failing borders. Governors overextend their resources to keep tithes flowing. Forge worlds groan under demands their manufactoria cannot meet. Even Terra itself, the throne world, feels the strain, its layers of bureaucracy multiplying like cancer in an attempt to mask the weakness beneath. The Imperium survives, but it survives as a body riddled with wounds, each scar a reminder of battles endured, each new cut closer to the bone. The enemies that beset mankind are not diminishing but multiplying. Orcs grow in number with each conflict, their wars self-sustaining cycles of destruction. The Tyranid high fleets learn with every battle, evolving to counter weapons that once held them at bay. The Necron dynasties stir in greater numbers, their tomb worlds no longer silent but active, their lords reasserting dominion that predates human civilization. Even the Aeldari, fractured though they are, weave their skeins of fate with growing desperation, hinting at wars yet to ignite. Humanity is not merely besieged, it is surrounded by predators growing bolder. Yet the most terrible enemy lies within: chaos. The gods of the warp do not tire, do not diminish, do not forgive. They seep into every crack, every doubt, every hunger of the soul. Wherever humanity despairs, they are present. Wherever ambition festers, they whisper. Wherever faith becomes fanaticism, they feast. Their servants are countless, from cults hidden in hive cities to war bands of traitor marines that strike from the warp's depths. They have no need to conquer the Imperium outright. It is enough to rot it from within to ensure that every victory carries the seed of corruption. Some whisper that even the return of Robut Guilliman, last son of the Emperor to walk the stars, cannot halt this shadow. His Indomitus crusade rekindled hope, but it was only reprieve. Guilliman himself sees this truth. In his writings, he admits that the Imperium he awoke to is not the Imperium his father dreamed of, but a theocracy of ritual and fear. He governs as he must, but even he confesses that he is steward of a realm already in decline. He does not speak this to his people, but to those who read his words with unclouded eyes, the message is clear. The Imperium endures, but its golden age is long past. The ecclesiarchy proclaims the Emperor's divinity as eternal truth, but even this faith has shadows. Heresies bloom like weeds in the cracks of doctrine. Splinter cults proclaim saints that never lived. Worlds, torn from the Astronomicon, invent new litanies. Strange variations on the creed, each convinced of its orthodoxy, each ready to denounce the others. Faith unites, but faith also fragments. The great cathedral of belief may yet collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. The Inquisition watches for such signs with ruthless vigilance, but their very zeal breeds fear. Countless innocents are purged alongside the guilty. Entire planets burn under the sanction of exterminatus. Each purge saves the Imperium for a moment, but at the cost of its people's trust. How long can an empire endure when its own guardians turn sword against it more often than against the Xenos without? And then there is the silence of the throne. For 10,000 years the Emperor has not spoken. His body endures, his psychic beacon burns, but his voice is absent. To the faithful, this is the divine mystery, proof of sacrifice eternal. To the cynical, it is abandonment. To the demon, it is opportunity. Rumors circulate in hushed tones, that the golden throne is failing, that the sacrifices are no longer enough, that each day is borrowed time. Tech priests whisper of circuits burning beyond repair, of systems failing whose makers are long gone. Should the throne fail, the Astronomicon would darken, and the Imperium would collapse into islands of isolation, each left to drown in the void. Prophecies abound in this shadowed age. The Eldar speak of Ragnarok of the stars, where gods and mortals perish together. Imperial seers dream of a black dawn, when Terra itself falls to shadow. Some whisper of the rise of a fifth chaos god, born of despair, birthed from humanity's own fear of extinction. Others claim that the Emperor stirs, that his silence hides not death but metamorphosis, that one day he will rise renewed or monstrous. None can say which prophecy will come true, or if all shall. But perhaps prophecy is not needed. The signs are plain. The Imperium is stretched beyond endurance. Its armies are weary. Its leaders are cautious to paralysis. Its people are crushed under faith and fear. Its enemies circle ever closer. The long night was never meant to be survived indefinitely. It was only meant to be endured until dawn. Yet, in 40 millennia, no dawn has come. And still the people of the Imperium endure. Hive workers labor without knowing if their food ships will arrive. Guardsmen march into battles they cannot hope to win. Pilgrims journey across stars they may never reach, believing that to walk is itself devotion. Even Guilliman himself, weary and burdened, shoulders a task no mortal could bear, because he knows that to falter is to invite annihilation. This is the shadow of the end, not collapse in fire, but erosion by time, a slow fading into silence. Perhaps the Imperium will fall in one great cataclysm, swallowed by tyrannid swarm or demon tide. Perhaps it will crumble piece by piece, its worlds lost to isolation until only terror remains, a candle burning alone in the dark. Or perhaps it will linger indefinitely, a half-dead empire that cannot die but cannot live, a monument to endurance without victory. Whatever the end, the shadow already lies across the stars. Humanity walks beneath it daily. Yet in that shadow lies also defiance. For though the Imperium is weary, it still endures. Though prophecy is grim, it is not final. The long night is heavy, but candles burn. And as long as one flame survives, the dark cannot claim all. The history of the Imperium is not the tale of triumph it was meant to be. It began with a dream of unity, a vision that mankind might stand as master of the stars, free from fear, free from superstition, free from the predators of the galaxy. Yet what endures is not the dream, but the shadow. The Emperor's light still burns, but it burns from a throne that is both tomb and beacon, sustained by sacrifice, silent and unyielding. The long night stretches across 10,000 years. Wars have been fought without ceasing. Heroes have risen and fallen. Faith has hardened into chains. The Imperium is weary, yet it persists. Its people endure not because they are promised victory, but because they refuse to let the flame go out. This is the paradox of humanity's empire, that its greatness lies not in what it has achieved, but in what it has survived. Every guardsman who holds the line, every priest who chants before a dying candle, every artisan who hammers shells for a war they will never see, all are part of the same defiance. The galaxy does not care for their survival, and yet they survive. The Xenos gather, chaos festers, the rift yawns wider, but still the Aquila flies, and still the name of the Emperor is whispered in darkness. Perhaps the Imperium will fall. Perhaps the shadow will one day close in, and the last candle will flicker into smoke. But until that hour comes, humanity endures. The long night is vast, but it has not ended them. And so the story continues, not with dawn, but with another vigil, another prayer, another flame lit against the endless dark.